is with deeds of loving kindness. And I just love that phrase, with deeds of loving kindness. It just makes it feel so much more. I've just found myself all big now. I don't want to do that. Sorry. Just I went all big for some reason. Yeah. Yeah. So Kusala Devi is going to take us through that. And I think the one thing about Kusala Devi that I really find it's really appropriate she's doing this one, because actually she's a very kind, warm person, and a lot of, you know, when you're with her, you can feel that there's a kindness that comes from Kusala Devi. So I think that it'll be really lovely to hear what she's got to say. So I'm not going to say too much more, and I'll just hand over to you, Kusala Devi.
Thank you. So Zach, I wonder if you could just mute people who aren't speaking. That'd be great, just because otherwise it sort of flicks between people a little bit. Might get a bit confusing. Right, I need to make myself less big now.
Can't hear you. You've muted yourself.
Low volume.
Yeah, I got muted.
Sorry.
I was muted. No, that's all right. That was quite funny. Me and Zach were both trying to unmute me at the same time. So we were like... Anyway, yeah, so I'd just like to sort of very briefly say a little bit about the precepts overall, really, and about Buddhist ethics, just very briefly to introduce them. And the main thing that I wanted to say was this thing around that Buddhist ethics really are around, I'm sure you all know this, but it's just, I just find it really important myself to reflect on again, that Buddhist ethics are about intention, but they're also about the effect that we have. So it might be that in a way, through our sort of ignorance and in a way our lack of awakening, we might not intend to cause people harm. But what I find really interesting is, can we be willing to learn and understand how our wrong views are affecting our behavior and how and where that might cause others harm? So what effect is the behavior that we are sort of living in the world with having on others? So, you know, it's one thing to just say, oh, but I didn't intend to hurt someone. But actually, if we have hurt them, can we really sort of look at what we might be bringing to that situation? So, yeah, what I also love about the precepts is that obviously they're not rules, they're principles. And the important thing about this is that we each have to know ourselves really, really well to be able to practice the precepts well. So we have to know sort of how we're working, what our tendencies are, and what area we really need to sort of watch out for. And I think we have to really have a courage and a willingness to be honest about that in ourselves. So to be honest about actually what are our ideals? So what do we want to be moving towards? And then just to know, when are we sort of not living up to those, and how's that happening? And sometimes that's really hard to do. I find that friends really help with that, actually, just sort of friends helping to reflect back when I'm out of line with my ideals. So yeah, the first precept, I'm just going to say a little bit about it, and then we're going to do some exercises. So yeah, the first precept, with deeds of loving kindness and abstaining from harm, or abstaining from undertaking to abstain from causing harm. So at that end of the spectrum, really, I think in a way it's obvious that, well, the other way it's translated is undertake to abstain from taking life. So in a way, like taking life, we you know, we know that if we sort of intentionally did that can be based in an unskillful mental state where we're inflicting suffering on another being. So in a way, whenever we're causing violence towards someone, what we're doing something that person doesn't want done towards them. But with this principle, I think there's no limits actually to the way that it can be applied. So I think it's just not quite as straightforward as just not causing harm. So I was thinking about this, especially in relation to self-metta. This area that I really, really struggle with is, when is something kindness and when is it laziness? So when am I thinking, oh, I really just need to sort of have a rest, like that's what I need right now. Like, when I really struggle with that, like, how do I know if that is just kindness and that's what I really need? Or how do I know if that's just me just sort of not quite, just being a bit lazy? So what I find really helpful is Sangha actually talks about spiritual laziness. And actually what I noticed for myself is the times that I'm most spiritually or dharmically lazy are when I'm very busy in a worldly way. So when I'm just moving from one task to another without actually taking time to just sort of reconnect with myself or connect with others. So I'm just running on adrenaline and I'm just sort of going from one task to another. And Sangha actually does say that is, in a way, that is spiritual laziness. So not taking time to have a little bit of space and just connect with ourselves and others. So I just think that area is really challenging. I have to know in that area what my ideals are and what my tendencies are in order to know what really is self-metta, what really is kindness, and what's actually going to be kind to myself in any moment. So there's this whole spectrum with this precept that goes from not killing through not harming and violence through kindness. Now, kindness at its fullest, I would say, is acting to enable the highest potential in all beings. So what actions can we take that will enable people to fulfill their potential? And then reaching out to an expansive love for all beings. And then that beautiful sutra that we heard, the blazing of metta. So metta blazing forth over all beings. So there's this whole sort of spectrum, and where our kindness practice might sit at any place on any different day or even minute to minute. It's like we probably move quite a lot between that spectrum. And sometimes we might feel that we don't get to the ends, but we're probably sort of somewhere around the middle. And then at times we might sort of stretch a little bit one way or another. But what we can do is train the mind. And obviously this is the case with all the principles. So just the importance of these small acts. So drop by drop. I think this is the case with all the precepts, just drop by drop, sort of training the mind towards skillfulness. So in the Dhammapada, excuse me, there's a chapter on evil, which is obviously quite a provocative word for us. So I would say it's rather on unskillfulness in a way. And I really love that chapter. Part of what that chapter says is, be quick to do what is beautiful, or be swift to do what is beautiful. So there's this other verse in it. Do not ignore the effect of right action, saying this will come to nothing. Just as by the gradual fall of raindrops, the water jar is filled, so in time, the wise become replete with good. So I find that very beautiful and very reassuring. So there's something about, like, at any time we can just practice those small drops and we can really trust that they will have an effect. So how can we just slowly be gently, gradually training our mind more and more towards the blazing loving kindness end of the spectrum? And just to say, sometimes through that process, I'm sure you've all experienced this, that actually we feel less kind and we can feel more angry and more grumpy and more closed. And yeah, just to say like that, there's no need to lose heart around that, because actually what's probably happening is that with awareness, we might just be getting a more realistic sense of what it is that we actually need to work with, and how strong those poisons are within us, the kleshas. You know, they are within us all, and there's no sort of sense or level of blame about that. Like, they are just there. Greed, hatred, and delusion are there in us. And yeah, it's really good to just see them more clearly without blaming ourselves about them. That's how it is. And the more we see that, the more awareness that we can bring, and the more sort of a kind attitude we can bring towards that, then that's when things can start to change. And that's when the alchemy can occur. So I love this idea of the alchemy of kindness. It's one of the things that really inspires me. So I love the way that Khemasiri was leading the Metta Bhavana this evening. So that sense of really connecting with the warmth in our hearts, the sort of rays of sun in our hearts, and then just bringing people into that warmth. And yeah, I think, you know, I often think about plants. When they're given light and water, they grow. There's this sort of beautiful, mysterious process that happens. And I think the same is true around kindness. When anything comes into kindness, into contact with kindness, kindness will have a transformative and positive effect on whatever it comes into contact with, whether that's within ourselves or within others. Okay, so let's do an exercise. Does everyone have a pen and paper? And if not, if you want to go and grab one, if it's not too far away. Just wait till all the boxes fill up again. Okay, so we might just be waiting for Rachel. Great. Oh, good. There's Ian. Everyone's like bouncing back in. Great. Okay. So before we go into the exercise itself, I'd just like you to take some time to just think of a time when someone acted kindly towards you. So when you directly experienced an act of kindness. Doesn't have to be anything really big or profound. So if there's just something that comes up, you can just trust what comes up. Do people need more time, or is that quite easy to connect with? Okay, I'm going to assume you've all got something or someone. Okay, so if you'd just like to, I'll just sort of lead you in a sort of slight grounding exercise. So if you just want to close your eyes, and we're just going to sort of ground in our experience a bit. So just connecting with the earth, with our weight on the ground or chair. And connecting with the space all around us, above, around. And then just touching back in on the heart area from the meditation earlier this evening. And again, as Khemasiri said, just noticing whatever's there. There's no judgment, no blame. Just noticing what's there. So then just bringing to mind this act of kindness that you've received. Bringing that back in whatever way works for you, whether that's an image or some words, or the felt sensation of what it was like in that moment. And just with curiosity, just noticing what sensations are there. So what was it like to receive this act of kindness? And again, there's no wrong answer here, so whatever happens is totally fine. So what effect does that act have on the sensations in your body? On your mind, are there any thoughts? Perhaps coming back and noticing that heart area. Okay, so in your own time, just coming out of that reflection and trying not to think too much or get into too much conceptualizing, but just writing some things down, just writing some reflections, anything you noticed. And again, you won't have to share this. There's no wrong answer. Just what did you notice? It's fine if you want to draw instead of writing, if there's an image or another way that you connect. Okay, so we'll move into the next reflection. So this time I'm just going to give you a minute or so to think of a time that you were kind towards someone else. So a time that you carried out some act of kindness, a time that you were kind towards someone. So again, if you want to close your eyes, and I'll just lead us in another reflection. So again, just grounding in your body. Just becoming still, allowing your body to settle. And bringing to mind the time that you were kind. And again, whatever arises, just holding that all with a kind attitude, without judgment. So what do you notice? What sensations are present in your body, in your heart area? What thoughts or images? So what effect does it have on you when you're kind towards someone? And then just bringing the person to mind who you were kind towards. And just noticing what effect did it have on them, although you might not know, they might not have told you. Might be that you're using your imagination. But how was it for them to receive that act of kindness from you? So again, in your own time, just writing or drawing, or scribbling, anything that you noticed. Perhaps particularly anything you were surprised by or interested in. And again, there's no wrong answers here. Everything's helpful. Okay, so if I could be unspotlighted, Zach, please. And we'll just go back to being all together. And it'd just be really great to know what anyone noticed there, if anyone's willing to share. So you're all muted, so I think you can unmute yourselves with the settings that we've got. No?
Yeah, I think so.
So did anyone notice anything?
I don't mind saying a little bit if you like.
Yeah, thanks, Rich.
My event was my little boy Toby giving me my birthday card on Sunday, and it was a card that he'd chosen himself. So there was a lot of thought and feeling in that, and he was really excited for me to open it. And during my reflection, I could obviously bring the memory back. I mean, it was only a few days ago, so it was very, very vivid. I remember how it felt to receive that card, and I could relive that while I was sat here. I remember feeling a distinct lightness in my body. I felt lighter. I felt warmth, the warmth from him, and obviously the warmth emanating from myself as well, to get something so kind. I remember the brightness in my eyes, this kind of elation, if you like, when when my eyes met his and I could see the joy in him, in this act of giving from him. The sort of relaxing of my muscles, this uncontrollable smile, this pure, unadulterated joy where you can't help it. Yeah, so that's how I felt at the time, and also pretty much all of that, I felt that over again while I was sat here, so very, very, yeah.
That's such a lovely description, Rich. Really, like the way you describe the sensations of warmth and lightness, and then that beautiful moment of connection when your eyes met your son's eyes, and the energy. It sounds like there's quite a lot of energy there as well. This sort of thing, vitality or something. It sounds like there was sort of energy arising through that connection and through that act.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think he would have opened it himself if I'd have given him half the chance. He was so excited for that moment, that moment of revealing, if you like, of the present or the card.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Rich. Anyone else happy to share? Oh, here's Harry in the chat. So first one, easy, ordinary, comfort. Oh, so this is receiving kindness, homeliness, peace. No big deal, yet speaks of a great depth of kindness. Tapping briefly and simply into that deep well. Being fed a delicious meal by my mum. Oh, that's so lovely. Yeah, thanks, Harry. Anthony.
I want to share. The last time I went to my allotment, I just locked the gates and we just got the car there and we're just about to drive off. And around the corner came this woman with a barrow full of rubble, and the wheel had burst on the tire. So she was trying to push this barrow along and it was going all over the place. And she was like really huffing and puffing, and now there was a car in the way. And just on the spur of the moment, I said, I went back in, I got the barrow that was on the allotment and brought it out and said, have the barrow. And the elation and the joy and the relief of the suffering, it was like literally, it was like she was doing a kind of like a job from hell, where you have to push a barrow full of rubble forever. And then suddenly to have a wheel that worked, and also the fact that she was going to have a barrow for her own allotment and be able to then do so much work with her garden. And the joy from her was just really beautiful. And it was like an instant, just like that. But it was a very, very special time, very special moment.
That's beautifully described as well. And what happened for you, Anthony, when you saw her joy? What happened?
It's just your chest just bursts, doesn't it, really? And also remembering kind of the joy I have for gardening and the joy that she was going to have with the gardening as well, and passing it on.
So something you've shared. Yeah, lovely. That's really lovely. It's so lovely hearing people's sort of acts of kindness. I find that very moving. Yeah, thank you.
I don't mind sharing an act.
Yeah, lovely, Kate.
Yeah. So recently my neighbour came out of a house and she was really upset, and her husband had been taken into hospital quite poorly. So I did all the usual things and sort of said, please let me know if there's anything I can do, and don't hesitate to ask. And then the next night, I'm working from home, but the next night she texted me and said, could you take something to Queen's for my husband? And I thought, oh my God, I don't really want to. I'm still at work. I'll have to go in the traffic. And I said, yeah, I texted back and said, yes, what is it? Thinking it must be really important. And it was some headphones. And I thought, oh, got to drive all the way to Queen's to go into a COVID-ridden hospital and drop off some headphones. But yeah, I can do this. But that wasn't actually the act of kindness. The act of kindness was my partner saying, hey, come on, I'll come with you and keep you company. So it was a really nice experience to be doing something for my neighbour, and to feel also that I was really supported by my partner to do it with me. And, you know, that it was just a really lovely sense of community, actually pulling together and feeling like I had actually put my money where my mouth was, and that was a really nice thing to feel. And also that recognising that my neighbour actually felt it was okay to ask, because we so often don't. So I was so happy actually that she had done that. Yeah, and we've carried that on a bit, you know, I've been and got a bit of milk for her and that sort of thing. So it's kind of set the ball rolling for a sort of real sort of sense of caring for one another, I guess, really. Yeah.
I love that story, Kate, because like you're talking about your intention, which is a very sort of pure intention, and then the resistance that came when you were actually asked to do something, which like I'm sure we can totally all relate with that. Like it doesn't always feel so easy to do it. And then actually, because of your husband's kindness towards you to offer to come, then it did make it sort of more doable. I just think that's a really beautiful story. And in a way, like you say, it talks about the value of sort of community and people coming together and sort of helping each other out in that way. So you weren't quite up for it, but your husband came, and so suddenly you could do it. And yeah. And also that means that opens the door for her to carry on that connection with you. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, and probably also allows me to ask her, which also I'm not very good at. So that's a circle of compassion.
Yeah, great.
I had a similar experience to that, which happened, I suppose, at near the start of the first lockdown that we had, and a very close friend of mine had to isolate, and so and I guess everyone was feeling quite isolated in a way, which kind of sort of enhanced the experience, if you know what I mean. So I offered to help them out in any way, and I ended up taking them shopping and things. And and when I went to take it, I think I felt less isolated, because it meant that I had that connection with someone that a lot of us have been missing out on, and it felt very reassuring to have that contact. And then when I gave them the things, you know, they were asking about, oh, how much do I owe you or whatever, and I said, well, I'm sure that you're going to be doing the same for me. And sure enough, 2 or 3 weeks later, they were doing the same for me, because for whatever reason we had to stay in. So there was a nice sort of reciprocation there. And I think we both felt a bit less isolated after that, and we did keep in touch even more than we had done before. And you know, we were all able to get a bit of an outlet when we could start to talk to each other or meet up and things. It had a bit of a better connect, you know, a more special connection there, which was nice.
Yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about this exercise, I wasn't particularly thinking about the lockdown period, but actually I was so moved by that, hearing about small acts of kindness in communities, and just that real sense of people just sort of looking out for each other, being there for each other. And there was definitely a lot of that around, and I think still is now. And just like you say, those acts of kindness do build community and connection.
Yeah, it felt really nice, you know, seeing your neighbours every day and taking more care of them.
Yeah,
even mentally, or being more aware of the people close to you, whereas often friends are further afield, or the people that you feel that you know are further afield, and it's kind of made that all seem a lot more condensed, more personal. So it was quite nice.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I think we'll move on to another sort of little bit of input and then another exercise. So yeah, I was just considering with this precept, I think in a way what can be quite key in this precept is empathy. And in a way, like, we all have that ability of empathy, of like imagining what someone else's experience might be like. So we might have to train our minds in it, but it's a quality that we can all develop. I remember at school actually learning about the word empathy and this sort of description that we hear of like putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And I really like that, just like, oh, what, like, just using your imagination to kind of leap and think, okay, what could be going on for that person? And I think the reason this is so strong and powerful is that we have to step out of our own preoccupations, really. We can't be so sort of, as we often are, just sort of full of whatever's going on for us. And we have to sort of be willing to step beyond our own views and even our own suffering, and ask the question, like, what might be happening for this person that is making them act in this way? So particularly with the difficult person. And actually, I think it doesn't matter if it's true or not, that sense of like imagining what might be going on for someone. I think that act of imagination in itself takes us beyond our sort of narrow self-concern and just opens us up. It makes us more receptive to the fact that there's another being, and it makes us more curious about what this other being's experience might be. Because as we all know, at the end of the day, we all want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. And we get it wrong, don't we? Like, we all just like go through the world trying to be happy, trying not to suffer, and we get that wrong quite a lot. And in that, we end up hurting other people as well. So just a little caveat, it's not to say that if someone's being terrible to you that you should allow that. So it might be that you have to sort of put boundaries in place or communicate to someone, or not allow, you know, things to happen to you that are going to harm you. But if there is something that's happening where you are feeling hurt, or that someone has been unkind towards you, can you still be open to what their experience might be as well? So I really love this quote from Percy Shelley. "The great secret of morals is love, or a going out of our own nature, and an identification of ourselves with the beautiful, which exists in thought, action, or person, not our own. A person, to be greatly good, must imagine intensely and comprehensively. They must put themselves in the place of another and of many others. The pains and pleasures of their species must become their own." And then those of you who know Vajratara will know that there's this other quote, which is actually from Sangha, Bhante Sangha, and it's one of Vajratara's favourites. It's one of my favourites as well, but I've just heard Vajratara, who's a friend of mine, say it so many times. So he says of the first precept, love, which is the positive form of the first precept, is no mere flabby sentiment, but the vigorous expression of an imaginative identification with other living beings. So I'll just say that again. Love, which is the positive form of the first precept, is no mere flabby sentiment, but the vigorous expression of an imaginative identification with other living beings. Something I've been interested in myself lately is that in order to do this, we do have to be quite sensitive. Just notice that when I'm a bit full up and tight and busy, I become a bit hardened, and it means that I'm not very sensitive to my own experience, and I'm not as able to be sensitive to other people's experience as well. Okay, so we're going to do another exercise. So yeah, again, just perhaps sort of getting comfortable, just closing your eyes if you want to. You don't have to close your eyes. So just connecting back with any sense of expansion, openness, warmth, softness that you might have felt in the last exercise, or even just hearing each other, hearing about those acts of kindness and the effect that they have on others and on ourselves. So this time, as we do in the Metta Bhavana, we're going to bring someone who's difficult to mind. So just notice what happens when I say that. And also just do what's appropriate for you right now. So it might be that you bring someone to mind who's just very slightly irritated you. Or if you're feeling quite robust, quite resourced, you could bring to mind someone who you find really difficult, whose behaviour you find really painful, who causes suffering. So just taking care of yourself within that, doing what's appropriate for you. And we're just going to see if we can exercise our empathy muscle and stretch it a little bit. So even if we don't understand this person, can we just use our imagination, just putting ourselves in their shoes, so we can easily assume that they want to be well, they don't want to be suffering. What might be happening for them? What might their experience be like? And if it's easier than doing the reflection, you could go into writing, if that's easier for you. So even if we don't agree with this person and their behaviour, what might they be experiencing right now? What might be making them act in the way that they're acting? And in this exploration, this act of imagination, what can you learn about yourself? And what can you learn about the other person? Is there anything that you have to let go of in order to turn towards someone and become curious? And whatever your experience is, just not judging that, just noticing. And then perhaps just asking the question, is there a practical and possible next step that you could take which helps you move towards this person and show kindness to them? So perhaps just coming back to your body, to the room, the sounds, what's around you. And again, just taking a bit of time to write anything that came out of that reflection. Particularly if there was anything that surprised you or that you didn't expect. And perhaps just writing down what that possible practical next step might be that you could take. And just noticing what happens without any pressure, what happens when you write that down, when you think about taking that step. Okay. So let's come back together again. Thanks, Zach. So when I was thinking about this exercise earlier, I was thinking how important it is with that last exercise that we can also apply that approach towards ourselves. So, you know, I'm sure we can all recognize that it's very easy to be sort of hard on ourselves and judge ourselves for experiences that don't match our ideals. And how is it when we bring a sense or an approach of openness and kindness towards ourselves? So when we find something difficult or painful, is it possible to just sit, just be open and curious about that and not blame? So is it possible to just sort of stay in that gap and just notice? Okay, so yeah, it'd be great to hear if there's anything particular that came out of that for people. Feel free to just unmute yourself and chip in.
I don't mind saying something if nobody else has anything to say. Sure. Okay. So just for a little bit of context, we have a relatively new guy at work in the office, and he's, how do I say this? He's a little bit perhaps different to everybody else, but also we're a very kind of close-knit team. Like, a lot of the people in the building have been there, you know, 5+ years, maybe 10 years, and he's new to this. He's come from the outside into this very well-established team, and he's trying to kind of find his place within it. And very early on, he sort of gravitated towards me, and he began visiting my office a little bit more regularly than was perhaps convenient for me, especially at the moment. Work's very busy, and he would constantly bring additional work with him when he came. So I started to find him really quite difficult. And what I noticed quite recently about my interactions with him was that as soon as I saw him, I had this kind of tightness in my chest, this, what is he bringing to me? How is he affecting me? How is he going to inconvenience me today? You know, and it all became very much about me and what was happening with me, and very little of it was anything to do with him and how he might be feeling. And just sitting with him just then, it made me think about how isolated and lonely perhaps he feels, because he's in this new team and he doesn't really know anyone. And he, you know, perhaps, and like I say, because his personality is perhaps a little bit different to the way that, you know, I don't really know how to explain it, but you know, perhaps people just misunderstand him. He's got a very unique sense of humor and this kind of thing. And it made me think about how, you know, he just wants to be liked and accepted like the rest of us do, you know. So he's come in for social interaction, certainly, and, you know, but also he's very career driven. So he wants to be efficient. He wants to succeed in his role. And I have a particular expertise at work, and he needs my advice. And, you know, I've very much been thinking about his impact on me and not thinking about how I could potentially help him further his own success at work and that kind of thing. So that was really, really interesting for me to feel that. I realized that I'm often putting a preconception of what I think he's going to want or how it's going to impact me before he's even opened his mouth, you know. So I think that the thing that I'm going to try and do going forward is to just kind of take a breath and allow him to engage me in what it is that he needs, and then actually assess my schedule and see if, because a lot of the time I find myself automatically thinking I'm too busy to help you before I've even considered whether or not I am. It's just, you know, so and oftentimes once I get over that kind of blockage, I have actually got time, and what he wants is actually relatively simple, and it will help him, and he is always grateful, and, you know, and there's goodness to come out of that. So yeah, so that's.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rich. Yeah. It's interesting, like when I led Karana appeals, I'd lead sort of exercises like this a bit, because people were often just meeting people on the doors that were saying no when we were sort of asking if they'd donate money. So again and again, you'd just be feeling like there was something difficult coming towards you. And I think in those moments, it's quite hard. We have sort of a natural response towards someone when we're experiencing something that we feel is unpleasant. There's a natural sort of hardening or trying to keep people away a little bit. And that's a bit like you described, Rich, when he comes, it's a bit like, oh God, what's going to happen here? And I always found it really useful that outside of those sessions of actually being on the door, that you just would use your imagination a bit to think, okay, what might be going on here? What might this person actually be experiencing? And, you know, you'd have to guess, like, you didn't always know, like, maybe they could be putting the kids to bed, maybe they could be making dinner, they might have had a really difficult day. And in a way, like, it didn't matter what the answer was. It was more that just suddenly you were relating to this other person and their experience a bit more than relating to yourself. And it's not always easy to do this. I just want to name that as well. Like, it's not like it's a really easy exercise just to suddenly think, oh, what's going on for that other person, especially if there's a sort of difficult relationship between us. But I think that any little stretch of empathy that we can do will just have an effect on how we're able to sort of open towards that person. Yeah. And yeah, that's a great example, Rich. Thank you. Anyone else got any examples or anything particularly that you want to share? And it doesn't have to be anything positive, by the way. It could be that you found it really boring, or that it made you angry, or, you know, anything that you experienced is totally welcome. It's just interesting to know what arose. Sarah, yeah.
Yeah. I would like to ask you a question. So I'm thinking if there's two particular people I have in mind, who I've known both of them for a very, very long time. And they've always been difficult relationship, no, not difficult people, but my relationship towards them has been difficult. And I found myself over a long period of time always trying to, you know, find that sort of loving kindness or metta, and always trying to sort of empathize. And I suppose I'm a bit worn out with it. And it's sort of that thing of at what point, you know, I know I'm dealing with my expectations of what do I think is going to happen. Nothing seems to change. I'm still caught up in, you know, worrying about them, or a feeling that I can't help them, or and actually they don't seem to be coming my way back. Nothing's coming back. You know, you're just pouring it into this empty, this sort of bottomless pit. And after so many years of doing it, you just think, am I really doing the right thing here? Maybe it is actually time to stop and somehow extract myself from this. And I'd love to know what you think about that.
Yeah, good question. So I think there's a few areas in there. One perhaps is around expectations. Okay, so an example I've got is that when I remember doing the Metta Bhavana once, well, actually this has happened to me a few times, but I remember a particularly shocking experience where the difficult person was there in my Metta Bhavana. I'm sort of wishing them well. And I noticed this voice of like, oh God, I wish they were well, so they'd just be much easier to be around. And it was like, oh my God, that's not about them, that's about me. And it was a bit shocking to notice it. But in a way, like, that's fine. Like, our motivations are going to be mixed, but I don't know. I think I had this, well, that was an expectation that if I'm kind towards someone, then it will change them. And in a way, that's not really what we're trying to necessarily do. So that's one thought. And another thought is, like, it sounds like that's just really quite difficult and unpleasant for you, those relationships, and just quite hard and challenging, actually. So I just wonder if when you're with those people, if you could flip it round, and instead of trying to pour kindness towards them, if you could just bring kindness and awareness to your own experience. So, like, what is it like to be with this person who I find a bit difficult right now? Can I just sort of notice that and bring a sense of openness and spaciousness around that, and just sort of, even like a sense of self-soothing or something, like, this isn't easy, you know? So just rather than sort of giving that energy out, like, can you just sort of bring that towards yourself and nourish yourself in that interaction? And in a way, take off the pressure of like trying to give out something to someone else. Yeah, so just bringing kindness to the whole situation, which includes yourself, because it sounds like that is they're particularly challenging relationships for you. And yeah, just like noticing the unpleasantness of that, and bringing a sense of like, oh, that hurts, that's hard. Yeah.
Yes, I know, and it's fact. I mean, I've written it down that, and I realized this early on, because obviously when you become a Buddhist, you kind of clock all these sort of feelings that I was in the early days. I realized that I wanted that person to change so that I could feel better, so that I could stop worrying about them.
Yeah.
And I know that there is still that there, but it has got to that point where I know that that person is not going to change, and that I have to find a way to live with it. But it is that feeling of, and I've let go. I've let go so much. I've worked so hard on this, and I feel I have come a long way with it. I don't wake up in the middle of the night in a panic, worrying about them anymore. I've really kind of managed to let go a lot, but it does, in the Metabhavana meditation tonight, I found myself the difficult person, and there they were again. And I thought,
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
it's how much more of this am I really going to be doing? But I can't bear to let go. I can't bear to sort of not have that relationship anymore. But I think I will definitely take on board what you said about that thing of just really going back to my own, just noticing how I'm feeling and just try and relax. And it's
even that sense of exasperation, it's just like, gosh, what's that like? Just being curious about that. Well, what's it like to feel like really at the end of my tether with this, just a curiosity there, without trying to change it, but just sort of really noticing, oh, what is it like to feel I'm right at the end here of my resources and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, thank you. I will. Yeah, it helps just to talk about it,
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing it, Sarah, because I think that's just, it's just a very sort of real thing that we have to work with, isn't it? When in a way we'd love for our kindness to sort of positively affect others, and for them to suddenly be well and happy in the way that we really want them to be, and when they're not, like, what do we do? Thank you. Okay, so just aware of the time, and we need to wrap up, I think. So thank you all. It was a bit of an experiment this evening to do the format a bit differently. So just to be together for the whole evening, and to try a bit of reflection, a bit of sharing as a whole group. So I'd be interested to know how that was. If you want to let me know privately in the chat, or if you want to send an email to the centre just to let us know, like, what's that like? And we'll do some similar workshops over the next few weeks exploring the precepts. But I'm just going to hand back to Padmasaki